We're going to analyze a standard and deconstruct it for more meaning so we're ready when we look at the student work. I've chosen to look at 4 MBT B4. You're going to need pages 1 and 2 of your handout so you can make notes as we go through this. The first 4 tells us the grade level. The second coding tells us our domain. The domain here is numbers and base 10 operations, and I'll show you that when we get to our companion document. The B coding tells us the cluster, and you see here the cluster heading snipped. Use place value understanding and properties of operations to perform multi-digit arithmetic. A cluster is a small set of standards that are highly connected. The language of this standard is to fluently add and subtract multi-digit whole numbers with sums less than or equal to 1 million using the standard algorithm. So let's look at that companion document I referenced. Your grade level facilitator should have already directed you into pulling this up at the beginning. If you don't know how to get there, it is on page 1 of your handout. I've scrolled through the document to get me into the domain in which we're looking, which is numbers and operations base 10. Again, you see that coding NBT. I've scrolled into our cluster B using place value understanding and properties of operations, and you'll see it gives you a little bit more information, including some vocabulary terms that are going to come up with this standard. And here you see the Louisiana standard on the left. So what I want you to do is take some time to read in this larger box and find some of the key learning for this standard. This standard really begins to make sense of the standard algorithm. And it's important to note that there is not one standard algorithm, but we are teaching them a process that is repeated. We also want them to begin to internalize this algorithm and the terminology that goes along with it that includes place value terminology such as adding ones, tens, hundreds, and so on. This standard does refer to fluency, and we want to really focus in on the fact that that means accuracy, efficiency, and flexibility. Fluency doesn't mean spouting something off in 3 seconds, but it means to use a reasonable amount of steps in time when solving, and also to use a variety of strategies. Another question asked when we deconstruct the standard is to identify specific strategies that are called for in this standard. And we've already kind of noted that as the standard algorithm. We also want to make sure we note the prerequisite standards. Here it does align to 3 NBT A2. And if we were to click there, that would actually take us to the 3rd grade standard that talks about addition and subtraction within 1,000. So this is really telling us that our students should come with a foundational understanding of addition and subtraction. And we can see that component of rigor is procedural skill and fluency, because we want our students to have some automaticity with this standard algorithm and truly begin to show that process of understanding the place value system. It's time to review our standards that are listed on our end of year rubric. We want to focus in the major work of the grade. However, we noted earlier 2 domains in which 4th graders will focus for the summer intensive program, and that is OA, operations and algebraic thinking, and NF, numbers and operations of fractions. So when we look here at items 1 and 2, we see that they are major work of 4th grade. However, they fall in that NBT, or numbers and base 10 operations domain. So we might choose to accelerate for items 1 and 2 if we have time. However, we definitely know we want to work on item 3 and looking at 4OA A3. Remember, when you click in your end of year rubric, on that standard, it takes you to achieve the course coherence map. Now you can see for MBT A3 has many prerequisite standards, and it does have major work of the 4th grade OA domain connected to it, as well as 5th grade major work. So if we have time, we do want to go back to this standard. But if we look at our end of the year rubric and focus in on 4OA A3, you'll see here prerequisite standards listed, some concurrent 4th grade standards that are taught, and then connections to 7th grade, 5th grade, and beyond. So we'll really want to focus in and make sure that this 4OA A3 standard is worked on and mastered as much as possible or accelerated during our 10 days in the summer intensive program. We're going to review the data, and to do that, I pulled a portion of the matrix report from Illuminate of some 4th graders in Caddo. And all I did was choose the first 20 students for items 1 and 2. I also have my end of the year rubric that includes the portion where I can add in my names of students who need support. This section should have already been completed prior to coming into this training. However, we just want to review it and provide time for those who may not have been given that direction. When I look at item number 1, it is multiple choice. And I'm looking at all of these red boxes, and I'm going to note those as students who need support or acceleration. So JA, EB, MB, SB, and so on. I write all of those initials here. Item 2 is even more. So item 2 was a constructed response item where they had to actually compute. And the teacher hand entered correctly either 0s or 1s, or the computer scored it for the teacher. So anybody who scored 0 in red will be added to the list for acceleration. So the first couple of questions I begin to ask myself are there large group deficits? With this group, I'm going to say yes, because 10 of 20, or half of our students that I pulled, missed item number 1. 14 of 20 of them missed item number 2, with 9 of those students missing both items. So that is concerning, and we're going to want to look at their work when we move into that step later on. It's time to really dig in and identify the need. So we're going to start with item 2, because even though it is not considered something we want to focus on in the first 10 days of our summer intensive program, or the only 10 days, we saw how many people had trouble with this standard, right? Like 14 of my 20 students missed it. So if they come, I really do want to go ahead and accelerate around that standard. And number 2 is just about solving multi-digit addition or subtraction problems, and in this case, it's the addition standard algorithm. So if you think back to how we deconstructed that standard, what was the level of rigor that we were focused in on? And the answer is procedural skill and fluency. If you don't remember that, you look back at your handout for pages 1 and 2. We've gotten some student work from Caddo students, actual Caddo students, for this item number 2. If we look at the left, we can see that our student, even though there's messy handwriting, lined up those digits and understands place value pretty well. In fact, they got the last 3 digits of computation correct. But when they went to add in the thousands place, it appears that they may have forgotten the 1, or they don't know that 1, 6, and 2 would equal 9, or 1,000, 6,000, and 2,000 is 9,000. So with that person, they may have just made an error in procedural skill and fluency, so we can actually start that student there because it seems they have pretty good understanding or conceptual understanding of place value. With this person on the right, I can see pretty great conceptual understanding as well, because what they've decided to do is expand this out and go ahead and add 2,000 plus 6,000 to get 8,000, 700 plus 300 to get 1,000 or 10 hundredths, but they skipped the 8 tens and the 0 tens. That's why they didn't get the 9 tens in the tens place. They went ahead and just went straight into the ones. 4 ones plus 9 ones is 13 ones. So this, again, procedural skill and fluency, it would not be conceptual understanding because they do understand place value based on what we're seeing. They just made a very easy mistake in skipping over what was in the tens place. Let's map out the standards we want to focus on in 4th grade for the 10 days of summer intensive program. If you're not teaching those summer intensive program days, then begin with 2 weeks at the beginning of the school year as your accelerate and intervention time, and focus in on maybe 1 or 2 standards for the 2 weeks. But I know I really want to focus heavily on numbers and fractions because our 4th graders really struggle with that, and we know that in 5th grade it's needed. So for the whole first week, I'm going to focus in on that area, bringing in grade 4, mission 5. In the second week, I'm going to go ahead and bring in mission 6, where we talk about fractions with decimals. Then I'm also going to go ahead and add in some of those operations and algebraic thinking standards. Grade 4, mission 3. You'll see I did not put my MBT standard here, but I'm going to go back as a teacher and think, every day we're going to have a little bell ringer around 4 NBT A2 or 3, whichever one it was, where we add and subtract multi-digit numbers with the standard algorithm within 1 million, because 14 of my 20 students didn't get that. We're going to dive into those accelerate materials that the state has provided us. So LDOE pushed out some materials in the spring of 2021 that helped with the virtual learning and acceleration of those last few missions. They're working hard currently. Teachers and educators such as myself are working on those materials for the first set of the year right now, and we're going to have them out before the beginning of the year. I can tell you that even though this says Eureka Math, it is highly connected to Zern, and we want to use these a week ahead of when we're going to teach this grade level content. So if we go through this, you'll see your tutoring preparation slides. It talks to you about any vocabulary. This one is actually missing the standards, so that's something we will actually have to fix on the LDOE side. But it usually tells you the standards of the grade level and the prerequisite standards. And you can see it also gives you hyperlinks for other resources. This Desmos activity resource is amazing. And if you look at page 7 on your handout, you'll see a link that provides you straight to a guide around the Desmos account creation. You'll notice the format of these sessions are very similar to that of Zern, where we go into some fluency and then into some concept development. There are slide notes on every slide for the tutor that mimic your small group instruction in Zern with that vignette or script. So it's easily prepared, you're ready, just click on it and begin the work with the students. So the Desmos activity that's embedded in the slide deck for Accelerate is pretty cool to use. It's like a Nearpod where you can assign students the deck, and then they can actually write in here and you can see their work in real time and you can provide feedback. So what the tutors have already done is set this up for you. What the creators have already done is set this up for you as tutors, and it even will give you some teacher notes sometimes. But to set up the Desmos activity or your account, you'll want to click on page 7 of your handout and go to that guide. Because we are a Google Suite district, when I clicked on the first Desmos activity, it let me log in with Google, and it brought me straight to the Desmos deck that I wanted to use. Now that we've mapped out our instruction and talked about the resources that are able to be used, let's actually see the steps that we take to decide what we're going to use for instruction. So if I'm going to accelerate for NFB3, then I'm going to go to my Year at a Glance tab for the 21-22 scope and sequence, and I see that it starts here in week 21. I go to the third 9 weeks tab of our scope and sequence to week 21, and I find that standard. I see it starts my Mission 5 work in Zern. So I can use any of those lessons that I want based on student need to really get into accelerating this specific standard. You'll see some other resources such as the Khan Academy and LDOE acceleration slides also linked in here, along with other enrichment activities. So you make the choice as to which of these instructional resources you'll use during that 2 weeks of July instruction.